Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Mark, a trainer here at WEX Field Service Management, and today we are covering QuickBooks Sync Training. This webinar will cover what is QuickBooks Sync as it relates to WEX FSM. We'll go over one-way sync items versus two-way sync items, QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop, the QuickBooks Sync tool, and then customer sync, invoice sync, payment sync, back office settings, where to find more training on syncing, and just some sync tips and best practices before our live Q&A where you can get your questions answered live on stream. And without further ado, let's go ahead and move on to our first topic, which is what is QuickBooks Sync? So if you are here, you most likely have been using QuickBooks for a long time, and now you are integrating your QuickBooks with WEX FSM. And this is great. This is going to help eliminate the need for double entry. You will enter items into WEX FSM. Those will sync down to your QuickBooks, and you'll see those items there. But there are some details that we need to get into, one of which is there's a one-way sync items that must be added into WEX FSM first, and then two-way sync items, which allows you to update those in both systems, and it will sync both ways. And oh, let's talk about that now. So one-way sync items are going to be your customer information, your invoices, and your payments. These are the items that are one-way sync. So after you make the switch, once you have turned the sync on and you're actually syncing and integrated, then you will want to enter your customers, your invoices, and your payments into WEX FSM first, and then those will sync down to your QuickBooks. And it'll be a one-to-one comparison. You'll be able to see information in both places, but it does need to be entered into WEX FSM first for one-way sync items. If I create a customer or make an invoice or take a payment in QuickBooks, that will not sync up to WEX FSM. So it's important that you know that. If you are still in onboarding, kind of as a disclaimer here, if you're still in onboarding, you have not turned the sync on yet, you will be entering into your previous software until you make the switch. But if you have questions about onboarding, we can go over that in the live Q&A because that timeline is slightly different. This is assuming that you're out of onboarding, your sync has been turned on, and this is how things will work moving forward after you make the switch. Then we have two-way sync items, and those you can edit in both WEX FSM and QuickBooks, meaning things like your chart of accounts, income accounts, liability accounts, taxes, and your QuickBooks item list. All of those, regardless of where you're at in your timeline with WEX FSM, you can update those in both places. Now, there are two different versions of QuickBooks. We have QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. So let's break those down. QuickBooks Desktop requires a sync tool. That is an application that is downloaded to your computer, and it is what allows WEX FSM and QuickBooks to communicate. QuickBooks Desktop requires this tool. If you do not have the tool or use that tool, you won't be able to sync with QuickBooks Desktop. Getting the tool is very easy. The sync tool, we will install it for you, and it's not anything extra. It's just part of your subscription. And I'll show you where this is in the system in just a little bit, but I did grab some screenshots here. You will be able to go to the Help Center, which you may have seen before. There's a little smiley face guy at the bottom here. You click on that, you go to Tasks, and then you will have a QuickBooks Sync Training. And if you're QuickBooks Desktop, this will be set up for QuickBooks Desktop, and you will be able to, the very first action in this module here is click this link to schedule your install meeting. And you'll schedule the meeting. You get in here, there's a little scheduler. You'll be able to pick the date and time, and a representative from WEX FSM will meet you in a Zoom call, just like this one. We'll take over your screen and install and show you how to use the app. For you to prepare for this meeting, we recommend having your admin username and password for WEX FSM and QuickBooks Desktop. You want to use the main computer that your QuickBooks Desktop file is on. And if you use a server, just let the representative know, because that will change where they install the tool. So that is for QuickBooks Desktop. Requires the sync tool. Once you have the sync tool installed, now you have a tool for syncing. And this will allow you to click sync and manually sync whenever you want. Or you can click auto sync, and then in the settings tab, you can set your auto sync schedule, which will allow it to sync every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or once per day. And you will also have an option to turn on enable auto sync at startup. So if you turn your computer off every day before you leave, you turn it on in the morning when you get to work, it will just automatically start up and start syncing if you have enable auto sync at startup turned on. So that's QuickBooks Desktop. QuickBooks Online does not require the sync tool. Everything is cloud-based. So like when you signed up, you would have given us your QuickBooks Online login info. The data team will just continue to use that to grab the data from your QuickBooks to load into your WEX FSM system. This is done during your onboarding period. But once that has been synced and the sync is turned on, it's going to sync every 10 minutes on the 10s, 24 hours a day. As you edit items in your system, every 10 minutes, it's going to pull and sync those items. Now, a very detailed piece of information here, you may not even notice this, depending on how much volume you do, but I do want to give a little more advanced concept here, and that is when the sync happens for QuickBooks Online, it actually has a soft cap at 30 items per 10 minutes. So let's say that you are having a crazy busy day of updating customers. You could go in and update, let's say, 40 customers in 10 minutes, which is a lot. So I don't know who's doing that every day, but if you do happen to make 40 adjustments within 10 minutes, your system will recognize that those adjustments have been made, but it will only sync up to 30 at a time every 10 minutes. So, if there is a scenario where you make a ton of updates, you go into your QuickBooks and notice that an update has not come through after that 10-minute sync, just wait another 10 minutes and see if it comes in the next batch. So it's not unlimited data every 10 minutes, but after a while throughout the day, as you're just working in the system, making changes, those will update over time. Biggest difference between the two: QuickBooks Desktop requires the sync tool and does allow you to manually sync. And QuickBooks Online, there's no sync tool involved. It all syncs within the cloud, but there's no manual sync option. It's every 10 minutes, it's going to sync 24 hours a day. Next, how can you check sync statuses? And we're going to jump into the system here, but I just want to show you. There's admin pages inside of WEX FSM that will allow you to check the sync of your one-way sync items, your customers, invoices, and payments, and your two-way sync items, your classes, income accounts, tax groups, payment terms, and QuickBooks item list. So now let's jump into WEX FSM to take a look at where you can actually see these syncs happening in real time. Let me just get to my notes here. There we go. Okay, so first I'm going to show you in your system where you can find one-way sync items, which are your customers, your invoices, and your payments. Customers, it's the Customers tab. So log into WEX FSM. Right next to the Schedule tab, you will see Customers in the main navigation in the top left, and click on that. That brings you to the Customers page. If I want to add a customer, I can click the red plus button in the top right, add my customer, fill out the information, and click Save. Once that happens, it will create a customer profile, and that will be saved in my customer list here. And if you're syncing to QuickBooks, then it will sync down to your QuickBooks and create a customer in your QuickBooks as well with all the same information. That way, you will always have that one-to-one comparison between your customer list here and your customer list in QuickBooks. As you make changes and updates to these customers, which you can do by clicking on their name to go to their customer profile, and then you can update their customer profile, click save, and that info will sync down to your QuickBooks. If you notice that a sync has not happened, this would be a great place to go to make sure that the sync actually went through, and you can check that here where it says auto sync status. So different statuses. If we click this drop down, ready means that it is ready to sync, but it's not syncing just yet. So if your QuickBooks Online, let's say, maybe it hasn't hit that 10-minute mark or been part of the batch. Error means that there's something missing, some type of error has happened. If an error happens, you will be able to hover over it and it will tell you an error code and what it wants from you. You can do troubleshooting here, or you can just reach out to customer care and let them know, hey, this customer is not syncing. I need some help. Syncing will turn blue here, and it will just show you it's actively in the process of syncing, in which case you don't want to make any changes to it. Let it sync. And then synced means that it has officially synced and should be visible now in your QuickBooks. All right, so that is customers. Now, something important about customers is you can delete customers from here. If you select a customer and click delete, it will delete from your WEX FSM system and also delete from your QuickBooks. Then, if you want to merge two accounts together, select both accounts, click merge, and this process does need to be done in a specific order. So if you know you need to merge some customers, definitely pay attention here. This is going to ask, which of these do you want to be the master? So let's say that Bree Anderson will be the master account, and then everything in the Aiden will merge into the master. But read here, warning, not performing this merge in QuickBooks will result in sync errors if the master customer selected in QuickBooks is not the same as the master customer in WEX FSM. So what does that mean? If you have two customers in WEX FSM and two customers in QuickBooks, you will want to first merge in QuickBooks. So the master is the only account in QuickBooks. Then do your merge in WEX FSM. Now, when the sync happens, there will be a one-to-one comparison. It'll know exactly what to sync to, and you will be good to go. So any merge you want to do, if you're syncing to QuickBooks, whether that's QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop, always do the merge first in QuickBooks, then in WEX FSM. That way you get that nice, clean one-to-one merge. Okay. Next, so that's customers, one-way sync item. Next, let's go to invoices, another one-way sync item. To do this, let's go to jobs, invoice list. The invoice list is exactly what it says. It's a big list of all your invoices in your system. But the reason why we're here today is we have an auto sync status here as well. As you create invoices in your system, they will be saved in WEX FSM and then will sync down to your QuickBooks, and you'll be able to see that one-to-one comparison of both invoices in both systems. However, you need to make sure that number one, you're entering invoices into WEX FSM first. That will sync down. If you create an invoice in QuickBooks, it will not sync up to WEX FSM. And number two, make sure you are checking this page often. You don't have to check it every day, but it is nice to come to this page and just make sure there are no sync errors happening. There's a couple reasons why a sync error may occur, but this page makes it very easy to troubleshoot. If there's an error, so right here, this says not ready. And I can see that there is an amount. This is an overdue invoice, but it hasn't synced and details is in red. I can troubleshoot this very easily by clicking details and it will tell me what it wants. So this says a tax group is required to sync. So we just need to select a tax group and hit save. And there we go. So you could do your own troubleshooting here. In theory, in a perfect world, everything would just sync perfectly and you would have no not readies or errors. But we all know that sometimes things get missed. And if that does, that's okay. You can come here and very quickly find your not readies. Let's say I want to just look at my not ready statuses to check for any errors. Select not ready. And then any not ready statuses in your system will show up here. A tip, a best practice here. If you create an invoice, but you don't add any line items to it, the line items are what actually allow the invoice to sync. So we can see here, there's a lot of not readies that have $0. I already know these will fix themselves. These, if I click on details, this will just say, this invoice does not have any line items or line item descriptions and cannot be synced to QuickBooks. So that's just something to know. If you create an invoice and then someone calls you and you save the invoice and you'll come back, you'll edit it later, you will see a not ready status because there's no line items to sync. Once you go back to that invoice and you add a line item, even if it's a $0 line item, then that will just fix itself and it will sync. So all of these that say $0 invoice amount, I'm not worried about. And then these other ones that do have an invoice amount, I'll just click on details, see what it wants. This one's missing an income account. It doesn't know where to sync. So I'm just going to select my job account and click save. And there we go. That's ready to go. So you can do your own troubleshooting right here from the invoice list. And our final one-way sync item we're going to talk about today are payments. You want to take your payments in WEX FSM first. That makes sense. Your technicians are going to use the WEX FSM app out in the field, perhaps taking payments there. You will be able to take payments in many different places in your system in WEX FSM, but the rule is take your payments in WEX FSM first, and those will sync down to your QuickBooks. To check on payments in your system, we'll go to Jobs, Payment List. Same thing as the invoice list. It's a big list of all of your payments. So, Billy Bob is out in the field and swipes a card, you'll be able to see that payment show up here. Once you see the payment in here, you will be able to check the sync statuses as well. So from here, same thing. If there's any errors, you'll see what error it is. Oh, you can also on this page, it's kind of unique to the payment list. If you click on this little red arrow, that gives you a drop down that lets you know the invoice that this is attached to, total amount. If there's any balance left over, you can take partial payments on invoices. And then you can click the three dots here to edit the payment, change it to a different customer, refund the payment. Refunds go back in the exact same way that they were paid in, or delete the payment. Maybe you recorded a payment in error and you just need to delete it. Okay. And that is the payment list. Next, let's look at two-way sync items. So everything we've talked about, your customers, your invoices, your payments, enter into WEX FSM first, and those will sync down as a one-way sync. Next, we're going to look at two-way sync items, which means you can edit those in both places. We'll start by going to Settings, Accounting and Taxes. Everything on this page is a two-way sync item. These are kind of your back office settings from QuickBooks. You'll be able to see which QuickBooks version you have. So if you notice that this says QuickBooks Desktop, but you know your QuickBooks Online, something went wrong in the process. So you'll want to reach out to customer care. So just double check, make sure that you have the correct QuickBooks type here. And then as we scroll down, classes, some of my customers don't use classes. So if this is empty and you don't use classes, that's okay. If you do use classes, you'll see those here. Accounts, income accounts, liability accounts, those will be here. Inventory part accounts, and tax settings. So a couple details on tax settings. If you do not collect taxes at all, then you'll want this to be off. That way, you create your invoices, taxes, you're not worried about them. If you do charge tax, you'll want to make sure that this is on. And then any tax groups that you have in your QuickBooks will sync up to WEX FSM. And if you make an adjustment or change or add or edit a tax group in QuickBooks, that will sync up to WEX FSM. So if you have managed your tax groups in your QuickBooks for many years and you want to keep doing that, that's fine. You can continue to do that. Now, if you have auto lookup tax rate by zip tax turned off, what you see here will be a one-to-one comparison from your QuickBooks, meaning there's no added tax groups. It's just a one-to-one sync. What you have in your QuickBooks is what you'll see in WEX FSM. If you turn this on, then ZipTax will add tax groups into your groups of taxes. And a use case for this, why would you want to do that? If you maybe have a new QuickBooks and you don't have a lot of tax groups added, or you would just like more of a variety to get more pinpointed on zip code taxes, you would turn that on. Now, just realize if you do turn that on, it is going to update and add tax groups into your system. And those tax groups are going to sync down to your QuickBooks. So if you're like, don't touch my taxes, I have my taxes in a good place, I do not want them, to add anything, you're going to want zip tax turned off. But if you're like, I've got 4 tax groups in there, let's turn it on and get some more tax groups so I can be a little more detailed, then turn it on. up to you completely. But to change this, because of how important it is that your taxes stay nice and clean, you will need to, you can't just toggle this on and off at free will. You do need to reach out to customer care to update this setting. But that's the biggest difference. Turning it off or having it off means it's not going to update your tax groups. It's just whatever's in your QuickBooks. Turning it on will add more tax groups from zip tax, and it pulls by zip code of the service location you're doing. Okay, next, we're talking about two-way sync items. We're going to go to payment terms. To do this, we'll go to settings, jobs, payment terms. This is a two-way sync item. So if you have payment terms in your QuickBooks and that was loaded into here, that will be a one-to-one comparison. And then if you update or add or remove payment terms in QuickBooks, that will sync up to WEX FSM. Same thing here. If I click new payment terms, enter a name and how many days they have to pay and click save, this will then save in your WEX FSM system and create a new payment term in QuickBooks and vice versa. This is really just what payment terms are you going to have with your customers. If you do a lot of single family home residential, it's probably due on receipt. You have problem, I fix problem, you pay me money. Very simple. If you are working with a commercial company, maybe you are doing more of a net 30. You do the job, you send them the bill, they have 30 days to pay. You will be able to select payment terms on your invoices with a drop down, and these are the options that will show up when you want to do that. So I create an invoice. I realize, my default is due on receipt, but I need to change this for this customer. These are the options that you'll have. So if you don't have an option that you need, come here to this page and make sure you add that as a term. And the last two-way sync item that we're going to talk about is your QuickBooks item list. So I've just navigated to an invoice. I went to my customer, Justin, went into a job that we did for Justin and just went to an invoice. So here's an invoice. We sold him a thermostat. And from here, if I want to see my QuickBooks item list, I need to do it from an invoice. And I will click Add Item and then click from your QuickBooks item list. Now, some of my customers, they don't use the QuickBooks item list. Maybe you do use the QuickBooks item list. And if you do, this is where you will find that. I create an invoice, I click Add Item, and I go to the QuickBooks item list. This will be a one-to-one comparison, and I can search for items here, fan motor, and then it'll just pull up. Once I find the item that I want, select it and hit Add Item. So now I've officially just added an item from my QuickBooks item list to my invoice. And since your QuickBooks item list is a two-way sync item, you can manage the pricing, the name, the description, the information about those items in QuickBooks. And that will sync up to your WEX FSM account. All right. And now just for some training and best practices, this will be the last topic before we get into our Q&A. So if you do have any questions, get those ready. And if you notice, let's go back to the schedule page. So if you'd like to learn more about sync, maybe you are coming from another, like a competitor software, and you are loading your data and you want to see how the sync and the load is going to work, you can click on the smiley face guy down here. We call that the Help Center. And then under search, you are able to type in, uh, QuickBooks. And then Razorsync, Jobber, Field Edge, where are you coming from? Type in the name of your previous software, and we most likely have an article for that. So let's go to RazorsYnc here as an example. And this article just says, RazorsYnc and QuickBooks to WEX FSM. Here is what it exports exactly. Here's exactly what we load, and then some expectations for that data load. And, each time someone comes from a competitor, we create one of these articles, and we've been doing it for years. So most likely what you need is in here. Then you can go to Home and Video Courses and Webinars. And from here, you can join our QuickBooks training sessions, which that's what you're doing right now. But if you scroll down, we have our recordings. So anyone else who maybe missed today's session, this is where you can watch the replay from today even. I will upload that and update that here. And finally, we do have some training. So if you're new, maybe you have someone who is joining the team in a month and they need to go through a crash course, you can send them here. They'll go to tasks and then right here, QuickBooks Sync Training. If you are needing to install the sync tool, this is where that happens. But there's also a bunch of other modules that runs through how the sync works. Okay. So that is all the information that we have for today's presentation. I hope you guys learned something. We're going to move to our Q&A now, but before we do, I just want to say thanks so much for joining. My name is Mark with WEX Field Service Management, and this has been QuickBooks Sync Training.